Okay, we're going to get started at 6:30. Welcome everyone to the January meeting of the Bidwell Park and Playground Commission. I am Commissioner Redeman, standing in for Chair Stoller as she is on maternity leave. I guess we will start today's meeting or tonight's meeting with a call to order. Roll call.
Commissioner Nickel?
Here.
Commissioner Har? Absent. Commissioner Hernandez?
Present.
Commissioner McReynolds? And Acting Chair Redmond.
Here. Thank you. And item 1. Before we get started, actually, I'm sorry, little housekeeping things. First of all, if you would like to speak tonight on any of the reports, feel free. The speaker cards are in the back. Please fill one of those out and hand it to Mr. Romaine. And then when your name is called, please walk around the back of the room. Sorry, it's been a long day. To the podium when your name is called, please. Okay, so item 1.3, special recognition and presentation. Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So tonight we would like to recognize the Alliance for Workforce Development. They've been with us working in the park under a couple of different grants. The first started a couple years ago. It was a drought response grant, and through that grant we were able to remove quite a bit of fire fuels and open up a lot of vegetation type of areas. We were lucky enough to have the Alliance for Workforce Development back again, starting this last June under storm damage response grant. And what they've been doing for us is they've been going through the park and removing material that was down from our storms last year. The Alliance for Workforce Development, the program, is designed to help people to get back into the workforce and to gain some work skills. And we've been very pleased with how the program has run. And out of everybody that's worked under the drought response grant and the storm damage relief, about 80% of the participants go on to get regular full-time employment. So we've been very happy about that. Our team that began under this grant, we had Eric Settles, Rob No, Keith Johnson, and Stephen Huerta. Of these 4 gentlemen, only Eric is with us still, because I'm happy to say the other 3 have gone on to regular full-time employment. Rob is working in sales very successfully right now. Keith, he moved out of the area to Sacramento. And Stephen, he's an aspiring park ranger. If you remember a few months ago, he was honored over at the Chico Police Department for his efforts in a prior program. And he's looking into getting into the Ranger Academy in Santa Rosa upcoming, so we're supporting him on that. So it's been a real pleasure working with each of these individuals. Eric is still with us and he's acting as the crew lead now. Our project area has been focused around the 1 mile area. As you know, if you spend any time in the 1 mile area, the storms that we had last year, there was a lot of trees that came down, and as a result, they produced quite a bit of debris. The particular focus when we started was along the bike path that runs from the 1 mile area through Annie's Glen and downtown. An example of some of the work that they did, if you see here in this picture, this is a downed oak tree, and what occurs is that the California wild grape and the invasive non-native Himalayan blackberry, they'll grow over these downed trees, and they create shelters, they affect sight lines, they add to fire fuels. So these folks, they're working with nothing but hand tools. There's no mechanical means at all. So they went in to this area and they started working on this downed oak tree. But to get to the tree itself, of course, they had to remove all the vines and the blackberry that were there. This is a work in progression. You can see that just with hand saws that they've taken this all apart. We had our interns, myself, we would load up this wood and then remove it from the park. Something that we've experienced from this, this whole area, once they've got this cleared, it's opened up a lot of sightlines. And this area in particular was known to be a hub of quite a bit of illegal activity. Myself, I've witnessed people sitting behind this oak tree using intravenous illegal drugs. And you have children riding their bikes on the bike path right here to school. So by clearing out this material, it's done a couple of things. It's added to the health of the ecology of the park, and it's also created a safer place for people to use this commuter route on their bikes and by foot. Further up the creek, along the same bike path, across the Rose Garden from the Card Center, there's another down tree that was causing problems on the creek, creating a blockage which was adding to significant erosion issues on the north bank. We were able to go in there and start removing some of that material also. It's difficult for us to get permits and things. It's a very long process to use machinery in there. So to do it by hand was our option. This second slide, you can see how the progression, how this is starting to open up this area. And from these pictures, you can see where this blockage was. There was just trash was getting built up there. Again, it was adding to the erosion to that north bank. And by removing that, you can see they're just out in the middle getting down on that. And it has opened up this area. It's beautiful. That garbage isn't there. The water is flowing more freely. The way that the removal was, I instructed them to leave particular places still blocked to where the water would flow more away from that north bank and kind of wrap around to slow down some of that erosion. So this was the end result of that. We've had quite a bit of wildlife in there. The otters like to pop their heads up there, and people have enjoyed that area. And finally, our last highlight of this activity that they've done up to this point, they're in another part of the park now. They're still in 1 mile, but working on another project. Along Valambrosia Way, again, there was down trees there that were covered with blackberry and California wild grape, and there is a lot of illegal encampments in this area. As a matter of fact, we had a fire in this area because of that last year. They were able to go in there and remove this material. All handwork again, just tarping it up, putting it in bins. And this is the end result. This area is nice and open, clear, comfortable. We're hoping that the public is going to utilize this area a little bit more as a walking path. As it is now, you come from the Card Center, the sidewalk goes and it just ends. So you're forced to go to the other side of the street to walk along. We're hoping to make it a little bit friendly for the public to use this as a walking corridor as well. Moving forward, they're still continuing, as I said, in the lower Bidwell Park 1 mile area. A lot of down trees. They're working around the 12 tables picnic area right now, getting a lot of that material out of there. We're hoping later in the spring we'll be able to get some machinery in there to get the big stuff out and maybe be able to maintain these areas on a more regular type of basis. Once this material's removed, we might be able to go in there and do some flail mowing and those types of things so we don't have to do these big projects. And we would like to thank the Alliance for Workforce Development. They've done an incredible job. We're proud to be working with you and continue, hopefully continue that relationship with another grant. We're also working, you're working with the the Butte Environmental Council to get another team together that we're looking at and putting over at the Tiger Ponds area. Any questions about the program or what we've been doing?
Is this a work training program, or you said it's like the other members have gone on to full-time employment?
So it's designed for people that are seeking full-time employment to get back into the workplace or to gain skills that they need to be hireable. We've had, it makes me very happy because some of the gentlemen that I've worked with and ladies have gone on, they're working full-time over at CARD now. There's a young woman that's working for Prestige Landscape as a supervisor. So it's been neat to watch folks come in, get skills, have a good time working in the park, and then go on and being able to provide positive references for them. And just the feedback that they've received from the public has been very supportive, and it makes them feel good that they're giving back to the community as well as gaining those important job skills. Other questions?
Thank you, and thank you to AFWD. You guys do a lot of great work. It's appreciated. Thank you, Shane. Okay, moving on. We do not have a consent agenda this evening. Therefore, there are no items to be removed from the consent agenda. We currently do not have a notice of public hearing, so we will then move to item number 5 for the regular agenda. Item 5.1, consideration of the 2016-17 monitoring report for the Peregrine Point Disc Golf Course. Oh, there you are.
I had a long walk, so can you hear me okay? These are first time using these, or do they come home closer to me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me okay over there? Okay. So. Yeah, this is a new setup, so I'm used to not being behind a podium, sitting over there. I like that better. So. Okay, where am I here? Oh, from the beginning. Here we go. Sorry. Do I have it? It's not working now. What am I doing wrong? I'm hitting beginning, from the beginning. Okay, Shane, I think I need you after all. I don't understand why it's not hitting from the beginning, so. I'm technically challenged for sure.
This is starting your first slide.
Yes, but it wasn't coming up to the slideshow. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Peregrine Point Disc Golf Course. For those of you that might not know, the Peregrine Point Disc Golf Course and Trailhead area is up on Highway 32. The actual disc golf course is about 20 acres of that area, but it includes some major trailheads for the south side of the park. There's the Guardians Trail, the Pine Trail. It also has the old wagon Humboldt Road, and also great points of interest. It's a beautiful spot. So those of you guys haven't been there. So when we were doing the Bidwell Park Master Management Plan, back in I think 2008 is when we finally did it, there was an environmental impact report. Part of that Bidwell Park Master Management Plan was a concept plan for the Peregrine Point Trailhead area. Now that concept plan included not just potentially a disc golf course, but also, as I mentioned, some improvements for major trailhead signs. It also had redoing the parking lot and the entrance. It had a restroom. It had picnic tables, shaded picnic tables. So it was a bigger concept plan than what you're seeing now. So as part of the EIR, they came up with a master mitigation monitoring program for that area. But again, keep in mind that that was for the whole concept and not just what we see there now. So as part of the environmental review, which we call the California Environmental Quality Act section, it allows an agency to have discretion to choose its own approach on how you're going to do monitoring. So we have adopted what's called an adaptive management approach, and basically it's that design looks really like complicated, but it really isn't. It just means you study, you review the results, and you adapt and make changes as needed. So it gives us the opportunity to have a flexible plan. We're not tied to what was originally thought of back in 2008 or 2005. It allows us to evolve over time to determine what are the best practices that we need based on the data that we have and the changes as it goes over time. So that's what we have as an adaptive management approach. Originally, there were 79 mitigation measures, and the mitigation measures range from air quality to water to botanical and biological, all the typical cultural, historical, all the typical things you see in environmental review. There were 79 mitigation measures, most pretty much tied to construction, and again, construction to the bigger concept plan that we had talked about. It has been pretty much narrowed down to about 20 or 25, and so that's kind of where we are now. The course has been developed. All those measures that were done when the course was developed, we're adhered to. Now that construction's over, a lot of those drop off the list, and now we're basically into the monitoring mode. And the monitoring mode really comes down to what we call the Big Four. And what we have up there is the Butte County checker bloom, which is a special status listed as rare and moderately threatened. It's on the National Native Plant Society list, it's on the California Fish and Wildlife list, and it's also on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services as species of concern. We have the Bidwell's knotweed, which is a special status also, but it's a little lower ranking. It's considered on the watch list. It's on the list as a special status, mainly because it's got a limited distribution. And it may be able to survive in other areas, but right now it's just right here. And that's why it's called the Bidwell's knotweed, is what they're looking at. The wildflower fields are just that. They're the wildflower fields that are out there. And then the idea is that where you find wildflower fields is usually where the knotweed is too. So we've been using the knotweed as an indicator of the wildflower fields. Bleh, that's a tongue twister. And then the big oaks, woodland, the blue oaks in particular, I couldn't see, and maybe they are, they're not necessarily listed as a special status, but of course any trees, especially oak trees, that we all love and dearly, we want to protect them to the best we can. So there are some measures in the mitigating monitoring plan to protect the trees the best that we can. So where are we? The monitoring started, we actually, and I'm kind of jumping around here, but we have an agreement with the Outside of Recreation Adversaries, Inc. I was thinking of you guys as the outsiders still, sorry. So to help us with this monitoring, they're the ones who are the stewards out there. They're the ones who built the course. They're also the ones to help us with the maintenance and operation and monitoring of the course. We have an agreement with them. They've done the development, and then one of the part of the development was we had a short course that was giving more impact at the time than the long course that you see out there now. One of their charges was to remove the short course, which they did years ago. So now we've done this is our 6th year of monitoring. I think it started monitoring in 2011. So this is kind of where we are right now. The checker bloom has been studied. It was studied from 2011 to 2015. And I will say that the ORAI, I'm going to use that, paid for those studies. That was part of their agreement, that they were responsible to pay for those monitoring studies, those botanical studies. It was not monitored in 2016 because the previous surveys had shown that there was documenting fluctuating increase in numbers, and there was a trigger in the monitoring plan that said if we see increase in numbers or the same amount of numbers as we did in 2005, then it's basically doing okay. So we did not monitor in 2016. That was my predecessor before, but that's my understanding is why it wasn't done in 2016. It was also decided that we would look at revising the monitoring plan. I think that it came to the commission before as a possibility of revising the monitoring plan, and then a full plan was going to come to you later, and then that didn't happen right now. But in that revised monitoring plan, the idea was to look at always doing a visual of checker bloom. You know, we have site visits always going to be happening every day, all during the year. And that if we see anything that's a trigger, that we would do a study. Or if we don't, for sure we want to do a detailed monitoring study in the 3rd or 4th year of that next 5-year period, which in our case would either be 2018 or 2019. So even though it wasn't done last year or this year, we're still on track with that revised monitoring plan. The next is the Bidwell knotweed. Again, similar, monitor annually. It was surveyed in 2011 and 2016. And I think I'll just go one over. In the 2016, Monitoring, it was a smaller study. It was done just in the fairway area. You can see the black line, that is the disc golf area. This is the comparison of knotweed from 2010 to 2016. The 2016 survey was only done in the fairway. If you see, I don't know how to point up here, but over in here, this is where the short course used to, oops, sorry. This is where the short course used to be, so that was not monitored. I don't know why my electricity is making it go, I guess. And then down on the lower corner over here is where knotweed was, and then also in the middle here, there's knotweed as well, as you can tell. Those areas were not monitored this last year, only in the course area, so those little yellow dots you see on there are actually the areas where you see knotweed. This is in the fairway over here, and then this area over here is what we call the KG Group 3. This is the area that probably seems to see the most trampling and the most impacts is in this area right here. So let me go back. And again, I mentioned the wildflower fields are used as surrogates. The knotweed's used as a surrogate for the wildflower field. So we're constantly looking at wildflowers as well. We had a really good year last year with our rain. We saw an abundance of wildflowers last year, so we were happy to see that. And then the blue oaks, again, as I mentioned before, we want to continually to monitor them. We haven't done a survey, an actual detailed survey, I think since 2011, I believe. I'm not sure, maybe soon, but later. And in that time, it has been reported that, and what we did is there's 307 trees just in the disc golf, 307 blue oak trees just in the disc golf area. So all those green dots that you see on there are all the oak trees, and then there's another 25 pines, and then there's some live oak and some other. But in that, just that red area that you see, there are 307 blue oaks. From what I can tell from the reports and reading the reports, again, I'm kind of catching up, baby tomato, on some of this stuff. But we've lost 2 priority, and they ranked them into what we call priority trees, trees that are definitely in the area that could get damaged from the disc golf. And then there's reference trees, of course. You always want some sort of reference to see, is it something else? Is it the 6 years of drought that we had? Is it, the environment that's causing these trees to die and not just necessary? It's a control group, basically. So we've lost 2 priority trees. It's debatable whether we even lost 2 because one was a multi-stemmed and one was dead at one time, but the other stem was alive. So we're not sure we need to go back and monitor and look and see if that tree is still considered dead. And then we had 2 reference trees also die out of all that 307 blue oaks out there. So what we need to do as part of the management, and I know that the monitoring program and the monitoring plan that you see right now has not changed over the last years. It's the same things that we need to do out there, and it's the same things that we should do on a continual basis. And I know that we have not done our best at that, and I say we, I mean the city of Chico. I believe that ORAI has done and held up their end of the bargain. They are the ones that are out there picking up trash, cleaning graffiti, trying to do picking up tree protectors when they can, planting acorns, so I really believe that it's really the city that has not been able to fulfill the requirements. So the main requirement for protection of the tree is to install wood chip mulch at the trees and the tees and the targets and the trees. And the idea there is that we want to reduce the compaction level around the root zones, as well as we want to keep the thin soils from eroding, and then also just general protection, and also to really help direct people as far as the trails. So mulch has been a problem for us. When we lost our street tree crew, we didn't have the abundance of chip that we used to have. And not only that, but we don't want to just spread any chip up there. We want to make sure that it's the appropriate chip. We want to make sure it's the native trees that we want to see up there. But fortunately, we have an urban forest manager now who's has a contractor who's removing some of the trees that could be viable for this, and we're starting to stockpile the mulch so that we can start bringing that up there and getting it spread where it needs to be spread. And out of that, ideally every tee and every target should have it, but we have prioritized 6 targets and 7 tees that we'd like to start with. And access is going to be a problem anyways, but up there, the tees that are at the top of the hill are the easiest, and the ones at the bottom of the hill have to be wheelbarrowed down. So it's a challenging thing to get mulch down there and then have it stay on the ground where it needs to stay is the other problem as well. The other thing that we need to do, as we talked about, is tree protection. We tried various means. This, the one on the left here with the kind of the V-shaped screen was what we started recently. ORAI tried a new design. In the past, we just had sticks kind of on either side of the tree, hoping that those, actually they were tree stakes, hoping that the tree stakes would divert the discs. I kind of was looking at some research as well, and then what I'm hearing and seeing, and I think Richie had mentioned this when he visited, that what we find is that the actual impact to the trunk is more of a problem, and also compaction of the soil, than if the disc happens to fly up into the canopy and hit a branch here and there. It's truly that, not that that's not good or bad, but I'm just saying that there's more damage caused to the actual trunk, and also compaction that would be if a disc happened to hit the top of the tree. So I looked at other disc golf courses you can see on the right. It came really down to protect, and you see the protection of trees from deer and elk and other animals. You usually see some sort of mesh or wire gate completely around the tree, and I think that's what we haven't done yet. We've always done these screens, and sometimes it wasn't quite lined up, or it would move or fall down. I think if we can completely wrap the tree with mesh, the mesh allows insects to be eaten by birds, which we want, doesn't trap moisture. It has the light and everything that we would need, but it would be sturdy enough to, deflect and also completely go around the tree is what we're hoping. So we're hoping to maybe try that. That has been done in other disc golf courses. And actually this graphic that I see here was actually in the 2011, the one with the actual, drawing was in the 2011 long-term plan, and I'm not sure why we didn't do that particular method, but it was actually proposed way back then in 2011. The other thing is also desired is to, Woody, I'm going to credit Woody for this picture. So actually the other alternative to not just protecting the trees is to look at alternative holes. And the whole idea is to allow those trees that are in the target zone to kind of rest and recover, and then also, or maybe just be permanently removed, but the whole idea is to kind of rotate them and move them over time, back and forth. And my understanding, I don't play disc golf, but I think it's a cool sport, especially up there. I think it's very challenging. It makes it fresh course for the golfers. It allows them to try another tee in a different location. But again, we would have to make sure that we had protections on those alternative holes in the trees around those alternative holes. The problem up there is very hard, lava cap, Tuscan soil up there, and I don't know how they dug those holes in the first place. So it's going to take a jackhammer or some sort of mechanical equipment to do it. We have looked at possibly maybe, and that's been the challenge. And then also we've had wet weather and we've had fires up there as well. I'm not making excuses, but that's part of the reason why we haven't done what we said we were going to do, but we will. And so talked to our park staff. We talked about maybe we don't dig a hole, maybe we do a concrete pad, and maybe the concrete pad's enough to hold it. So we're kind of looking at options, but we're looking at trying to make sure that we won't be able to do them all, but I think that we can do at least the priority ones that have been identified in the report, the ones that are receiving the most problems. We do have a couple alternative holes up there that we move seasonally. One is, I think, hole 3, is that right, Phil? Hole 3, I believe, that we move seasonally because of the peregrine falcons up there, so. The other one I see up there, the biggest problem, and I want to mention too that disc golfers are not by far the only users up there. We have mountain bikers, hikers, bird enthusiasts, you name it up there. It's great to see how many people are up there. And in fact, we're glad to have people up there because just up the road we had 2 motorhomes and 2 trucks burnt and trash everywhere. And I think the presence of people up there is what we need, because otherwise I think we'd have the same problems there. It's easy to get off the road, easy to dump. We are finding household trash in the trash cans, so we know we still have people coming doing that. But so the real thing is, when I go up there and others, they don't really know where to go. It's not really anybody's fault, because it's not clearly delineated what trails are what and where to go. And I know we tried in the past, and ORI has tried with rocks and limbs and different things to try to delineate the trails, but as soon as the trail starts, we all know it becomes the trail to go down. So what we need to do is really make sure that we delineate the trails and where we want people to walk. I think that we need to somehow barricade either with the snake rail fencing or something that not, remember I told you that KG3 area, that not group area that's in the middle, and that's really, it's really easy to just cross down to the next hole. And that's not even the next hole, but they like to just walk down that hill. So I think if we clearly protect it, you know, this is where knotweed is, this is where the wildflowers are, this is where we don't want you to run and walk and hike and bike. So we would put up a sign saying why we're doing that and how sensitive plants are there and we want to protect them. So that would help in that area. The other thing is that dead tree limbs can move, rocks can move. Sometimes you don't know if the rock's really a trail or if it's just the rock. So I had seen in a report, I can't remember what report I had seen, about the thought about using possibly straw wattles, native straw wattles. Straw wattles are what we typically see in storm water protection to keep erosion down, and so this would help protect the thin soils and keep the soil on the trail. They can decompose over time. They're pretty easy to install. They're fairly reasonable to get and priced, I believe. Doesn't necessarily mean, but I think it would just be a start to try to get people to know where the trails are, and then over time, the other grasses will grow around it and we'll know where those trails are. I may not need them for the long term, but I think in the interim, I think it would be a good alternative just to see, just to start getting to the point where we have people walking where they really need to walk and bike where they really need to bike. We also need to decommission some of the road trails. There are some trails that cut between holes like we talked about. And I think that that would also help. And then this is Woody's idea as well, which we think is a great idea. Right now, when you go up there and you try to connect with the South Rim Trail or go to the other trails, you really don't know how to get back to your car to the parking lot. So the idea is to have a loop trail that would direct people back around outside of the play of the golf course, of course, and loop them back around and direct them back to their car so they're just not, going anywhere through to get the car. And I think that's a great idea, and we'd like to complete that. And we also have some of our partners, Chico Works Trailworks, thinks it's a great idea also, and they're willing to help us try to get that work done. And then again, we just would want to try to create natural barriers when you're in the tee area so that you don't decide to go up the hill, and really direct them to the trails and to the next tees and next baskets. And that generally, those can be done with rocks or boulders or something natural that would keep them away from there. And the big one for me is signage, signage, signage. We have some signs in the beginning. You have the big kiosks as you get up there. The main thing that you see is whether the course is open or closed. I think that's the most important thing. People, oh, can I be here or not be here? But we also have a little bit of interpretive sign, which are weathered over time. So we'll want to make sure that we get that. But we really need trail signs, and we need trail signs all over the park. It's just not Peregrine Point. All over Upper Park. We're so woefully bad about putting it, we just don't have the directional things that we need out there. And then also we could have hole signs at each hole, which again talks about the rules, shows the fairway, shows where you go to the next tee. Because some of these tees, I'm not even sure, you can't even see the basket. I'm not even sure where to go. So this will help direct them where that basket is. And Phil's probably laughing at me because it's like, oh, we know where it is all the time. So, but it talks about the rules again. There's talk about doing a sponsor. That's that hole 3 sign that you see there. They have purchased the actual metal signs. They just need to print them and get them up, but they're waiting, and they've done the actual sleeves also for the toe and poles. It's just a matter of us digging the holes. That was on the city of Chico to dig the holes. So once we get those up, that'll help as well. Other signs we talked about is, protect those sensitive rare plants. And again, the trail signs that we see, out of bounds signs, we want to make sure that people will clearly understand where the out of bounds are, where the sensitive area signs. And there's really some great interpretive signs that we could do up there. The cultural and historical resources are just amazing. And I don't think a lot of people know about those. And we all know that if we know about something, we have a better chance of protecting it and doing the right thing on that. So I think there's some great opportunity. The QR codes, we talked about that, where you can come up, you scan that little code, that's the thing with the little, and you could get the whole history of the Humboldt Road Trail if we wanted to. And you can almost imagine that, wagon train going down that trail. Because really when you go into the disc golf course, that dip that you go into, that is the old Humboldt Road Trail. And so we'll want to protect that. We talked about years ago doing some sort of footbridge over it, so you're not having to walk through that dip there. So I think there's some really great ideas that are out there. We're also working on a Park Watch app. Now you have to do it, Eric. That'll give us the ability to do a wayfinding. You'll be able to be in the park, have a GPS, be able to report things that you see, know where you are, do a QR code anywhere you are. And so it's just another thing that another tool to try to get people to know where they need to walk and where they need to go. So in summary, as I mentioned before, I believe ORI has held up their end of the bargain. They have met the requirements of their operating agreement. They have paid nearly $50,000, probably, I think, I found another annual report, they actually are over $50,000 in biological studies, insurance materials, and other things that they've done over the past 7 years. They have donated 2,500 volunteer hours. Again, that's probably up to about 2,700 now that I found that other report. And if you use the typical $15 an hour, which we do for an hourly rate for, which I think is low now, that's close to almost $40,000 that they've done in in-kind labor and being in there. So I think I would rather see them do the in-kind labor than have to pay for biological studies that really I think that we should be doing as the city of Chico. So I propose that the city take care of the botanical and biological monitoring and pay for those costs, and that the ORI concentrate on what they do best, and that's maintaining the course and keeping and being the good stewards that they are with their users, and they also try to help educate other users as well. So I think that's a better partnership for us, and I do believe that the city needs to play a larger role in the management of that course. Like I said, it's not just disc golfers up there, it's all our users, and we all need to manage it, and we just need to help guide people where they need to go and what they need to do. And so we will make every effort to implement the additional improvements, but as we know, it is going to be time and it is going to be money, but we'll do it as much as we can with the resources that will allow. And that's kind of where the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. I have to say, I think that was probably the most comprehensive report I've seen in the 3 years I've been on the commission, so thank you so very much. Fellow commissioners, are there any questions before we open it up to the public for feedback?
I have a question, Chair. Thank you for the report, Linda. We don't have an estimate in terms of what the costs are going to be. We're just going to wait till things start being implemented and we start going forward with the plan.
Yeah, I was going to try to do that for this report, but it was just too hard to know how much we can actually be in part of volunteer labor. I mean, we can get those costs for you and let you know. It is going to be a cost. I know the biological and botanical surveys. I know one of the reasons, when I first was appointed interim, I called the company who was doing it and asked if they could do it for the 2017 year because I knew it hadn't been done. And they basically didn't have the time, and then also they said what we were going to be able to charge, because again, the ORI agreement said $5,000 or less, so they were trying to keep in that study so that they could afford to pay the study was $5,000 less, but the study is going to cost more than that. So at least I know that they were paying in the past between $4,000 and $5,000 a study, but it was actually probably more because they kept it under because that's all that they could afford at the time. And so I think that right there that cost is there. But I think if we can stagger it, I think I did neglect the knotweed. I think we're looking at doing every other year instead of every year, so that will save some of the costs. And then, like I said, the checker bloom would be done like every 3 or 4 years. And then we're trying to, now that we have Richie, look at the blue oaks and maybe use in-house staff to kind of help us with some of that, or interns or others. So the actual installation of the signs and poles and all that, I can get that to you later, because we're not sure what the method we're going to use.
Go on one more thing, Shane. When I was up there, I saw motorcycle tracks up in the golf course. I don't know the difference between a motorcycle and that, but I also heard that there are people that are using motocross bikes up there, using the area. So on a segue, I mean, when we start discussing our fees for parking and et cetera, that this money could be allocated for all the improvements we're looking for on top of the improvement to Upper Park, but that will be discussed later, I imagine. Thanks, Linda. Very good.
And we'll also look for grants. We'll continue to look for grants also.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Linda, so I've been there Peregrine at least twice in the last 3 months. And, you know, the tree protectors are broken, they're knocked down. I'm glad to hear that we should worry about the trunk to the ground mostly, but it's inadequate what's there. And the concrete pole, that seems useless. And so it seems neglected, or that solution was ineffective. And so something else has to be done, and that's going to cost more. So I have a concern that we need to do something about those trees and the alignment of trails. Everything you've said acknowledges what needs to be done. When I read the detail, I don't see where and when, when. And so if we have I don't know how rain, first of all, would stop a whole year of activity, because it rains so little in Chico. I understand hard rock and not having a jackhammer, but it seems that this plan acknowledges what needs to be done by the city, and that's great, and appreciate what's been done by the OARI group, but we've got some problems. We've got erosion around the tees. In order to protect if the chips were there, we'd have to put more stuff in. I'm new to the commission, but this is lacking detail that I worry about.
And I apologize, I neglected to say that. This is just the annual report. This is just the annual monitoring report. There's also the update and revision to the monitoring plan, which I tend to bring back to you, and that will have more of those details.
That would help,
yes.
Because we want
And
some accountability.
Yes. Right. I just couldn't put it together. I'm still trying to decipher all the data, and I didn't have time to put it for this meeting, but I had planned to bring that. Plus, I wanted to hear if you agreed with my changes that I was making before I came forward with a monitoring plan.
I think there would be a lot of people behind putting the chips in, and, you know, I have a question, like, you know, it's just details, like how much mulch do we have now? I understand the plan. When will we have enough, and what will be the date for that? I'm just concerned that if there's no teeth in something, it's just going to get gummed and nothing will happen. I'm just, because we have the storm problems and the trees coming down and all that kind of stuff.
And you've been told that for the last 5 years, too.
What's that?
I know that the commission's been told that, and the public's been told that for the last 5 years, too, and I understand that and recognize that.
So do you expect to have that action plan within the next few months?
Yeah, I hope to get it to you at the next meeting, but it might be the following meeting,
okay,
depending on what else gets put on top priority. But no, I was hoping to get it next month to you.
Great.
And I'll have more details as far, I don't even know yet how much mulch we're going to need until we actually get out there and start doing the measuring and seeing what we do. They're asking for, the monitoring plan asks for 6 inches, and so some of that would be quite a lot of mulch. And so we're going to measure heat. That was just 1 day's of work, I think, right, Mirti, that you saw in that picture. That mulch that you saw in the picture was only just 1 day of tree removal, so we're hoping that it's quite a bit bigger now. And we will go buy mulch if we have to. We'd rather not to, but if we have to, we will.
Is it money that stops us from the tree protection devices? Is it money that stops us from getting the things that are going to contain the mulch?
I think the wattles is something new that wasn't talked about before. I think that could be relatively inexpensive, and I think if we could just do that right now, and then at least get those in, so when we do get the mulch is going to stay where it's supposed to stay. As you know, especially those first couple holes in the beginning, they just get washed down the hill. So I think that we talked about using the wattles not just in trail delineation, but also around the tees to make sure that the mulch stays on the tees. So it's money and it's time, both. But we'll just have to just plan for it. And then I do believe that we have some great partners that want to help us. Like I said, Chico Trail Works said that they would help with the mulch, spreading it. Mm-hmm. So I think if we could just get the actual material up there, we can have the labor, I think, is the least of our worries.
When is Make a Difference Day? Is that in April or May?
That's in May, but before that, Chico Trail Works, they've already proposed this day before yesterday, a couple dates to partner with ORAI, and do a couple work days up there. So
Great.
that's in progress, and that's in March and in April. So the efforts are moving forward.
I was going to say perhaps depending on funding for some of the other aspects, maybe Make a Difference Day, they could do another particular project up there. I don't know if that's feasible, if there's enough time, if we have the money, but it's an idea.
And one of the things that, I don't know if you noticed on the whole sign, that they had talked about doing before was actually getting sponsors for those whole signs, and if they could get some sponsorships for those, they might be able to get some funding as well through
Great.
that. And then they also talked about, and we need to vet this a little bit better, but talked about maybe putting a recycling bin or a donation box up there, but we need to talk about that a little bit more.
Okay. More questions?
Nobody else. The signage problem is, you know, and the city doesn't own a jackhammer. We'd have to contract out for the jackhammer.
We have an auger, I think, on the Bobcat. We're not sure if that's going to be enough, but my understanding is we can rent a jackhammer. It's just, again, then it becomes getting the body up there to do it. But we can look at that. Getting someone to do that as well.
Okay.
So it's a combination, but we will look at it. It's not going to just be digging the hole as easy as we think. It is going to take some equipment. And then the mulch problem is getting it, they're having to wheelbarrow it all the way down to hole, I don't know, 15, 16 down there. And it's an arduous task.
I know.
Yeah, so I'm not, again, not excuses, it's just, it's not just going out and putting in, like in your backyard and putting mulch down. It's a little more complicated than that.
Just, it sounds like Shane's saying we're making progress,
and we have a lot of partners that are stepping up and wanting to help. They have done mulch in the past. It has to be something that has to be continually done. It can't just be a one-time thing. Now, the alternate holes, once those sleeves are in, you know, we can do those and move those, but the mulch is going to be continuous and has to be continuous. And even the trail delineation, because you're always going to have trails show up there they're not supposed to show up. So it's just a constant process. And they have, over time, done mulch in the past.
is the interpretive signs that you're talking about, they'd have to be drilled too? They're like the ones with Sherwood Trail? Is that kind of, no?
They're not the same, but we would have to do some kind of installation, and it is law of the cap up there, so anything's possible. We'll figure it out, and we'll get them in.
And one of the things is the snake fencing that they use. That's where the fencing, you know, kind of goes like this. I didn't just realize myself that I thought you had to have these poles and those, but apparently they're not. That's what makes them work, is that they're snake fencing. And so I'm encouraged by that we could probably get that snake fencing around that knotweed area sooner than not too, because we don't have to dig a hole. That we could probably get that done quicker too. But the sign, we're working on signs all over the park. We've kind of had some hurdles in the past of purchasing hurdles that I think are getting over, and being able to, we have a sole source that we can go directly to anytime we need a sign. That was always a process to have to get bids and all that. So I think we're on the right track to be able to get things done quicker.
Commissioner Nichols?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have one more question. When we talk about sponsors for the polls, I remember when I was on the council and working with the Outsiders, is that they had people donate $500 for the hole. Are those people are going to be contacted first in terms of still sponsoring, or are you just going to?
You know, I think that was a question for ORAI, but I would guess that they would if they have their partners, because they're the ones who are going to do the whole signs, and so they were going to do the outreach for that, and they have the contacts of who might be willing to do that. But if they don't, then we can certainly do some outreach. So we could even put it on our donation page, or something like that we have for Caper Acres, and put it on there, sponsor a sign or sponsor a hole, do that too. So I don't know if those people are still around than when they were. Believe it or not, it's been 8 years.
I know, they're still around. I'm
Good.
just wondering, we should
So
contact
if you know
them.
those, I can pass that on to them.
All right, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, do we have any speaker cards?
We do. Woody Elliott?
And just a reminder, as Mr. Elliott walks up, if anyone would like to speak to any of the upcoming items, please fill out a speaker card on the table.
Hello, Woody Elliott, Treasurer of Friends of Bidwell Park and Conservation Chair of Mount Lassen Chapter, CNPS. I have some thoughts, again. The operating agreement dated June 18, 2010 with the City of Chico and ORA states, Prior to construction and annually thereafter, city agrees to collect data pursuant to mitigation measures of various numbers required by and in accordance with the Mitigation Monitoring Management Plan. However, operator ORI agrees to reimburse city for costs associated with such data collection in an amount not to exceed $5,000, which can be increased annually by 5%. $26,300, I calculate, has been spent from 2011 to date by ORI for operating for environmental monitoring studies contracted by the city. This is the $35,000 plus obligation if invoiced by the city for these, $5,000 times 7. In 2017, nothing was invoiced. ORI did not pay anything. In 2016, I estimate out of their $5,000 obligation, they paid $2,000 for monitoring of the knotweed. And this was for a field survey of the knotweed with only raw data delivered by the consultant and no written interpretation. Regarding oak monitoring, has shown statistically significant damage to priority or impacted blue oaks trees compared to reference unimpacted control trees. My observations indicate that impacts of thrown discs lessen the condition of blue oaks more by scattering branchlets than bruising of their trunks. I question the usefulness of tree guards that may only at best protect the trunks and have not adequately functioned for the past 7 years. Clean mulch or wood chips should be weed-free and not necessarily from native trees. Blue metal tone poles that are scattered in various postures throughout the course for the past 2 years should be removed. They're just ugly. Mentioned the loop trail construction, which I'm glad is endorsed. That's something that Chico Trail Works or other volunteers could really get involved with. I really discourage other outside organizations from doing work that ORI was obligated to do because the City Council approved the disc golf course development contingent on its management and maintenance by ORI. This was very clear that ORI was, like a lot of other models for extra activities in the park, are on the hook for making it happen.
If you could wrap it up, please.
I'm
3 minutes. Thank you.
I encourage all commissioners to visit the course to appreciate its ongoing management needs and mitigation monitoring requirements. Commissioners should consider the revised monitoring protocols with input from the public, and this is important, at subsequent meetings of the Commissioners' Natural Resources Committee. Then, in a work group setting, its details can be discussed and better understood. Friends of Bidwell Park and the chapter of Mount Lassen chapter of CNPS expect that required mitigation and monitoring being done by the City of Chico in a timely fashion after a 2-year delay, or the baskets be removed and the course closed until CEQA requirements is achieved. Either way, it's your chartered power and duty, Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, if you could please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I realize we don't have a clock, I believe, up here, right? Okay. Any other speaker cards?
Lise Smith.
Thank you. I'll hold up my fingers when you've got 1 minute left. How's that?
I appreciate it. I
Okay.
don't have on a watch. I worked for the City of Chico from 2006 through January 2014 and got to actually work on the negotiation of this contract with ORI. And it wasn't something that I really wanted to do because I really didn't support disc golf being up there. But